sky. You can see it. You know it's probably made of water vapor, but you can't reach it because it's out of reach. But it's up there in the sky and it physically exists. The cloud in the world of computing exists as well, and it physically exists. It's made up of computers that are all connected up by cables with each other all over the world. And they're housed in facilities all over the world. Okay, so these are real computers. Computers do the work. They can do a lot of different things, including offering storage, offering backup, providing applications that you might want to use as well. But they're run by computers and they're all interconnected with each other. Most of these computers are located in buildings and facilities that are called data centers. And this is really where the cloud really exists. These are the computers that run the services for us that are generally called the cloud. And the cloud can include storage and other services, as I mentioned. Some of these buildings are like warehouses. Some of them are like office towers. But their purpose in life is to hold a lot of computers. And they're typically owned by companies or organizations. Okay, so companies like Apple and Google and Amazon and Microsoft, Facebook, governments run them, universities and other corporations. They run facilities that are buildings that hold, all they do is hold computers in them. And there's hundreds of thousands of them around the world. It's become a really, really big part of what we use. Now, they're connected together. Okay. Any questions about data centers? I don't know, anybody ever been to a data center to see one? It's not something the average person usually gets to do. I was fortunate that I worked for a computer company that ran data centers, and I visited data centers every week. And so they're nothing exciting. They have a lot of computers and very few people in them, but the computers are doing work. They're doing some work. It's just that instead of being on your desktop, these computers are in a data center somewhere. And as long as you can communicate with the data center by over the internet, you can get to and from the information that's in a data center. And the cloud is just a marketing term that's used to apply a name for a lot of different services that are offered by computers that are running in data centers. They're not exciting facilities, but they really make the internet work and the cloud work. Now they're all connected together. Okay, so I did find a company that gives some maps of data centers. Not all of them. People like Google and Microsoft and Apple and Facebook, they don't really want you to know where their data centers are located for security reasons. They don't want you, but there are, examples of data centers all over the world. And some may have more in the United States, some may have more in Latin America, some may have more in Europe, some more in Asia, some more in Australia. They're all over the world. They, because computers use a lot of power, it's often popular to have them in areas where there's less expensive electricity, where there's electricity generated by dams or hydroelectric plants or things like that. And so you find a lot of data centers. And so you might have a Google one and an Apple one and a Facebook one and a Microsoft one, all located right next to each other in different buildings. And so that's a very common layout for data centers. I couldn't find any maps that showed you the cables that connect all these data centers on the land, but I did find a company that makes cable maps of cables that go undersea. Somehow or another, we got to get, messages from us to Europe and other places, and in land masses, a lot of these cables are buried underground. So chances are when you see a street being dug up, it's because a cable is being added, for the purpose of connecting the internet, in one way to another. And some of these cables are owned by companies. Google owns its own data centers, and they also own their own cables. Microsoft owns their own data centers, and they own their own cables. And these cables really, take information and move it all over the world, from continent to continent, all over the place. You can see, like, Asia. There's just a lot of different cables here that exist, and it's kind of an interesting, or way to take a look at the world. Everything's connected together, in one way. So, and there's also multiple cables and multiple data centers. So if, Apple or Google or Microsoft or somebody has one data center that gets knocked out by a hurricane, for example, they've got a duplicate of all of the information that was in that data center at one or more copies all over the world. They have in data centers. So they make copies of things as well, because they want to make sure that no single point, will cause them to lose anything. Okay. And so that's a lot of why the internet kind of works the way it does, so that even if something goes wrong, you can usually, get out to different places in different ways. Kind of an interesting, way to look at the world that connects things together. And this is what it looks like with a cable coming out of the ocean. They're usually wrapped in containers and sealed and everything, so they don't get corroded or anything. And some cables are made out of fiber optics, and some are made out of copper. In the old days of telegraphs, remember when telegrams were the only way you could communicate around the world? There was one company I read in Great Britain that actually owned over half of the telegraph cables all over the world. And it just changed things, just like telegraphs changed how, we were able to send a message from, in New York to London. Instead of having to put a message on a boat and wait for the boat to get there, we could send a message by telegram, with Morse code over a cable and communicate a lot faster. And now we just send bigger messages. Instead of sending a dot and a dash like in a Morse code, we send lots of little pieces of information that go over these cables all over the world all the time. That's what we're connected to when we connect from our home or our cell phone. Okay, so you connect to the cloud when you have an internet service provider or a cellular provider service. Okay, these are organizations you typically pay a monthly fee to, and they give you a service. Okay, your internet service gives you a network in your home, and so they get you from your laptop to the internet. That's what they do. Cellular companies run cell towers. And when you get an account with a cellular company, you can take your mobile device with you. And as long as you have a cellular connection, you can communicate with their tower, and they take care of getting you out to the cloud. So those services are what connect us as consumers to the internet and the services that are on the internet that are part of the cloud. And that's why we pay them